Another day, another story. Before you think about getting rid of an autocrat, get rid of bad habits and black traditions. Once, in a small kingdom ruled by an autocrat named King of Ignorance, people lived in fear and poverty. The king was cruel and selfish and cared only about his wealth and authority. However, a young man named Henry, sick of living under this persecution, decided to gather his courage and stand against the king. Henry thought the only way to get rid of an autocrat like King Ignorance was to first get rid of the bad habits and black traditions that had taken root in their community. He traveled from village to village, spoke to people, and spread his message of hope and change. Slowly but surely, people started listening and Henry's movement grew. However, the winds of Henry King's rebellion quickly caught Ignorance and sent his army to capture him. But Henry refused to give up and continued to spread his message even when he was on the run. In the end, the people of the kingdom began to see the light and began to stand against the king and his corrupt ways. The King of Ignorance was eventually overthrown, and Henry was crowned a new king. He ruled with justice and compassion, and led the kingdom to a new era of prosperity and peace. Since then, Henry has been remembered as a great leader who brought about change by changing himself first, and his people's customs and traditions. Thus, the kingdom became a shining example of what could be achieved when the reflection of power was shown to light. In today's world, many people seek to remove authoritarian leaders from power. However, before such drastic measures are taken, it is important to assess the underlying causes of these authoritarian regimes. This video explores the role of bad customs and black traditions in creating and maintaining autocrats in power. By understanding the root causes of these systems, we can better equip ourselves to challenge them and change them for the better. In many parts of the world, people are struggling to challenge authoritarian leaders and remove them from power. However, before we can successfully remove these autocrats, we must first address the underlying causes that allow them to thrive. We will explore the role of bad customs and black traditions in the creation and preservation of these authoritarian regimes. Bad customs and black traditions are often the root cause of authoritarian rule. These practices are deeply embedded in society's culture and have been passed from generation to generation. They are often so deeply embedded that people do not consider them problematic. Such bad customs and traditions can be anything from corruption and nepotism to discrimination based on sex and racism. In order to succeed in challenging and changing authoritarian regimes, we must first identify and address these fundamental issues. This requires a deep level of self-reflection and awareness, as well as a willingness to challenge the status quo. One example of a bad habit that contributes to authoritarian rule is corruption. Corruption can take many forms, such as bribery, embezzlement, and nepotism. When leaders and officials engage in corrupt practices, they create a culture of impunity that allows them to remain in power despite widespread public dissatisfaction. Another example of a bad habit that contributes to authoritarian rule is nepotism. Nepotism is the practice of favoring relatives and close associates in professional and political appointments, regardless of their qualifications. This practice can create a sense of entitlement among the ruling class, resulting in a lack of accountability and a sense of disconnect from people's needs. Black traditions, on the other hand, are cultural practices that perpetuate harmful attitudes and behaviors. These traditions are often deeply rooted in society's history and are seen as a source of pride and identity. However, they can also perpetuate harmful beliefs and behaviors, such as racism, sexism, and homophobia. One example of a black tradition that contributes to authoritarian rule is the idea of a strongman leader. This tradition states that the leader must be authoritarian and cruel in order to maintain power and stability. This idea can be seen in many authoritarian regimes, where leaders are praised for their strength and willingness to use force to maintain order. In conclusion, before we can successfully remove authoritarian leaders from power, we must first address the underlying causes that allow them to thrive. Bad habits and black traditions are often the roots of these issues, and it is up to all of us to recognize and challenge them. By overcoming these harmful practices, we can create a more just and equitable world for all. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.